As we begin today, I want to look at a statement that is in the frontispiece of a book written by Thomas James Norton, The Constitution of the United States, Its Sources and Applications. Thomas Norton was a longtime judge about 75 years ago in the United States. And here's the statement that is made in the frontispiece of that book regarding our Constitution. Menaced by collectivist trends, we must seek revival of our strength in the spiritual foundations which are the bedrock of our republic. Democracy is the outgrowth of the religious conviction of the sacredness of every human life. On the religious side, its highest embodiment is the Bible. On the political, the Constitution. As has been said so well, the Constitution is the civil Bible of Americans. Next to the Bible, the best book on the Constitution should be in every home, school, library, and parish hall. And the best book on the Constitution by that statement is made referring to Thomas James Norton, The Constitution of the United States, Its Sources and Application. But that particular statement was signed by Herbert Hoover, Alfred E. Smith, James Cox, John W. Davis, Mrs. Calvin Coolidge, Mrs. Benjamin Harrison, Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt, Mrs. Grover Cleveland, and others. And it simply points out that we need to be back to our Constitution. But I think it is interesting that even 75 years ago, this is pre-World War II period, actually, they were telling us that we are menaced by collectivist trends in America. I suppose that would put it back perhaps even closer to 100 years ago. But that's exactly what's happening in the nation right now. The collectivist trend has brought us to the brink of an all-powerful collectivist, socialistic, Marxist-style government, especially that being the case, being led by the Democrats. And Kamala Harris, who is the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, represents that exactly. I have in front of me an article that is written by the New York Post. This was 2 days ago, and it is referring to a palace coup. The title of the article is, "The Top Democrats Threatened to Forcibly Remove Biden from Office Unless He Dropped Out, and Set Him Up to Fail at the Trump Debate," according to sources. Now, in the article, they discuss a palace coup, and that is exactly what I want us to think about, a palace coup. And when we speak about a palace, we think of kings, queens, dictators. We think about top-down government control. We think about military dictatorships. We think about nothing like our Constitution, nothing like a republic, nothing like a democratic republic as has been set up by our founding fathers, in which all the power belonged to the people, and as you ascended the ladder of different offices, the power lessened. But no, you don't have that at all. So here's the article from the New York Post regarding the palace coup against Joe Biden. And I want you to note carefully regarding what has actually been happening. We'll make some comments along the way, and then I want to refer to a story referring to a wicked queen, and we'll, of course, refer that to Kamala Harris. Operatives at the highest levels of the Democratic Party threatened President Biden with forcibly removing him from office unless he stepped down, sources told the Post. Now, immediately you see that there are power players behind the scene, that it is not what you see up front, but there is a deep state in place. Quote, "The well-orchestrated palace coup to stop the faltering president from seeking re-election had been in place for weeks, but stubborn Biden fought it every step of the way," a source close to the Biden family told the Post on Monday. Now, note carefully, that's a source coming from one connected to the Biden family, that he is being pushed out in a palace coup. Now, Biden is supposed to talk tonight. I'm recording this on July 24, Wednesday, and he is supposed to speak tonight. Speculated by some Even myself, I wondered if he was even alive. But he's made an appearance, and supposedly he's to make an appearance this evening. And I suppose that will be a well-orchestrated, by the Barack Obamas of the world, a speech in which he's going to support Kamala Harris. But be that as it may, the insider also made clear the anger, the paranoia, the frustration Biden displayed as the party elite circled around him and piled on the pressure. Part of the elaborate strategy to remove Biden from the race, as he announced it in a shocking letter posted on X Sunday, was allowing him to debate Republican candidate Donald Trump last month on live TV in Atlanta, Georgia. So basically, the sources are saying that Biden was not really up to it. They knew it. And everybody in the insider track of the Democrats knew he was not up to the job. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But they pushed him out onto the debate stage so that the American people can see him collapse. And here's how the Post puts it. Quote, during the car crash 90-minute debate, Biden appeared confused, slack-jawed, and at one point froze up, with his performance turning the tide against him. It's exactly what the insiders wanted to have done. In other words, the Democrats have known this all the while, but have been lying, bold-faced lying, to the American people right through their teeth for the last several years. I can remember clearly Sean Hannity, particularly Sean Hannity, so clearly pointing out Biden's dementia, cognitive decline 4 or 5 years ago. And yet, Democrats continue to get out, deny it, and even till the very last, supporting him as president until Sunday morning, and his staff found out on X that he was actually exiting the race. The Democrats have known it all the while. The insiders, they've been lying to the American people. I do not understand how it is that people that have sound minds in our country would be supportive of the Democratic Party at all at this point. How can they? They have been played like a yo-yo. That debate was set up to convince Democrats that he couldn't run for president, the source said Monday, as calls for him to bow out mounted. Biden insisted he would continue, but party bigwigs threatened to invoke the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. You know, the Democrats don't care anything about the Constitution. I thought it was interesting, ironic, bitterly ironic, that they wanted to invoke that against Donald Trump because they said from the very beginning of Trump's presidency that he was unfit for office, and they talked about the 25th Amendment. And here it is. They themselves have to threaten the 25th Amendment on Joe Biden to get him to bow out of the race. But the real thing is, Kamala Harris is the one responsible for not invoking the 25th Amendment. You read the 25th Amendment, that is, if the president is incapacitated in some fashion, then it is her responsibility or the VP's responsibility and the cabinet's to point it out. But they lied to the American people. The article goes on. The amendment allows for the vice president and members of the cabinet, well, there you have it, to declare the president is unfit to serve and force him to step down, the source added. The White House and representatives from the Democratic National Committee did not immediately respond to the Post's request for comment. Of course not. Although Biden immediately endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate for president, the source said the Democratic delegates will be strongly encouraged to instead back Arizona Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly for president at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August. Now, that's what these insiders are saying, that it is going to be Mark Kelly. He's going to be pressed or encouraged to be up for the vice president, or up for the presidential slot. Some holdouts still have yet to endorse Harris as Biden's successor, despite there being less than a month until the convention and only 4 months until Election Day. And most notable among them is former President Barack Obama. Quote, "We will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead," Obama said Sunday. Now, this is so choice. Obama has been behind the scenes the entire time. This shows us one thing and one thing only. This is all become about power, a power position. Nothing but power. It's not service, not serving the American people, but it is power. They want to tell you what kind of car to drive. Kamala Harris has that in her plans. You must drive electric. They want to tell you that you cannot drill for oil. They want to tell you you're going to have affordable health care. That means, of course, I pay for your health care. You pay for my health care. We pay for the illegals' health care, people who don't belong to this country, but they wanted them to come in and we pay for their health care. She says affordable child care. That means you're going to have children. I'm going to pay for it off the backs of the working person. How about affordable university, affordable education, universities? That means I pay for your university education. I paid for my own, but I have to pay for yours too. That's what they want. What is this? This is Marxism. It is socialism to the core. That's all that it is. The Democratic Party is the Socialist Party of America. Following the debate, the article goes on, first son Hunter Biden suddenly became more involved in his father's day-to-day business and insisted upon attending every official and unofficial meeting. This is what the source told the Post. Quote, Hunter felt he, Joe Biden, was being set up, and he was very concerned about his father. These people, these officials, are not on Joe's side, said Hunter. You know what? When you get into the Democratic machinery, it is dog eat dog, isn't it? They just kill each other off. You know what? They don't like each other. They eat each other. They devour one another. They don't like one another. Many were also shocked, the Post goes on to say, by the letter posted on Biden's X account as it was typed on his private letterhead rather than the White House notepaper and signed electronically. You see, this is the way a palace coup works. Everyone was totally shocked, the source said. It was pretty telling that Joe Biden tweeted a heart emoji, or Jill Biden tweeted a heart emoji and nothing else. Democratic Party insiders have also known for at least 2 years how Biden was in decline, said the source. It shows us, just as we've said, this has been a massive, massive cover-up, the greatest in American history, orchestrated by the Socialist Party, aka Democrats in America. But also, conservatives have been right all along. The Sean Hannitys of the world, the Jesse Waters, the Dan Bonginos, the Mark Levins, Tucker Carlson's, they've been right all along. That's exactly what this proves. The article goes on quoting, when I saw him a couple years ago, it was frightening, said the source. He was just repeating slogans and had no idea who I was. So what do we have? Let's see. Number one, we have a massive, massive cover-up. This looks like Richard Nixon's was child's play. This is a massive cover-up, propping him up in the chariot, as I pointed out in a podcast not long ago, just as they did just as they did Ahab, when Ahab was struck between the joints in the armor, and they propped him up to make people see him. This is exactly what the Democrats have been doing. It's just been a power play. Number two, it's illegal to transfer the monies from Joe Biden's campaign account. And how about all these Democrat voters who voted for Joe Biden? I guess it doesn't make any difference. They've not voted for Kamala Harris, and yet all of the Democrats are lining up behind her. And what a wicked woman is she. We'll get to that in a moment. But this is how the deep state operates. You know what? I've had so many people that I talk to that poo-poo the idea that there's a deep state controlling things. You know, if they can't see it now, they will never see it, because it is plain as can be, as possibly can be. And not only that, but I want you to think about this. How dangerous is this? It's all about power. The U.S. Constitution has been turned on its head, and it's dangerous for those who want to roll back the government. Who's that? Donald Trump wants to roll back government. It used to be that clarion call sounded in the homes of many Americans. But now the Democrats, they just have this thing rolling. They want power, power, power. So let's think about a story. And I want to tell you a story. And this story is from the Old Testament in the Bible. And you'll see to whom it applies as we proceed along the way. The story is about Athaliah. She is a queen mother, and she appears in the book of 2 Kings as well as 2 Chronicles, which is a recounting of the events that occurred in the king's account. Athaliah is called a wicked queen, or that wicked woman, in the 2 Chronicles account. She orchestrated a revolution against the sitting king. It was a palace coup, just as we're seeing right here in America. The year is approximately 845 BC. Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Surely they need no introduction to you. Ahab and Jezebel, the wicked king, and maliciously wicked woman, Jezebel, who actually came from the country of Phoenicia, married Ahab. Ahab was the son of Omri, and they were in the northern kingdom. These were the days when the kingdom was divided between the northern kingdom, 10 tribes in the north, and the southern kingdom, Judah and Benjamin in the south. So the political relations at the time between the north and south were relaxed. And the southern king was a good man, but he was weak. Like many presidents we've had in the Republican Party, weak as water. And this is the way Jehoshaphat was. Jehoshaphat was the king in the south. Ahab was the king in the north. And his oldest son, Jehoshaphat's son, was Jehoram. Now, there are a lot of J names in this one, so we have to kind of follow it closely. Jehoram was his son's name. He had his son marry Ahab and Jezebel's daughter, Athaliah. You might take a step back and say, why would a good king in the south want to have his son marry, Jehoram, marry the daughter of Jezebel? Would you? No, you would not. Well, that's what he did. So she now marries the son of Jehoshaphat, Jehoram. And she now becomes, pretty quickly, the queen of the south. Jehoram now becomes king when his father, Jehoshaphat, dies. This is the southern kingdom of Judah. He is 32 years old when he begins to reign, and Athaliah now has become the queen. She inherits her mother's strength, and like her mother, she developed a fanatical devotion to Baal worship, the cult of Sidon. Elijah's preaching, the preaching of the prophets, made no dent against her, made no inroads. Her heart was hardened. Even his blow against the prophets of Baal did nothing to slow her down. Remember, he had killed 450 prophets of Baal in 1 Kings chapter 18 and chapter 19. Notice this, that godless people are not slowed down when they're in positions of power by good people, by the prophets themselves. So Jehoram now takes the throne from his father Jehoshaphat when Jehoshaphat dies. And the first act that Jehoram does as king, recorded at least, is he murdered 6 younger brothers of his own. These were the princes of the realm who were known to be favorable to the ancient faith of the nation. This is 2 Chronicles 21 and verse 4. Now there can be little doubt that Athaliah, who was a power behind the throne, just like Jezebel was power behind Ahab's throne, was a much stronger character than her husband. Now, it reminds us of what's going on right now in Washington, D.C. Everybody knows that Joe Biden is incapacitated. The conservatives have been pointing it out for 4 years. The liberals and the Democrats have been denying it for 4 years. And some of them, by the way, I think this is just hilarious. They still deny it. They say, well, he had a bad debate performance. It's absolutely incredible how they will lie, knowing that that's not the truth, hoping that you will buy it and swallow it. Well, at any rate, Athaliah, now the queen mother, the queen, and Jehoram the king, and she is the power behind the throne. Jehoram, however, dies after 8 years of his reign, and his son is Ahaziah. That's confusing because his wife is Athaliah. She's now the widow, and her son and his son, Jehoram and Athaliah's son, Ahaziah, is 22 years old, and he ascends the father's throne. So Athaliah is the queen mother. So she is supreme in the councils of the nations, just like Joe Biden, incapacitated, not running the country, someone else is. Ahaziah, her son, 22 years old, is on the throne, but she kind of pulls the strings behind the scenes. You see how it's working? Same thing we have going on in America. You know, Athaliah, just like Kamala Harris, pulling the strings behind the scenes as well as the Barack Obamas. But now her son, Ahaziah, dies in only 1 year. So now the only person or persons who stand in the way of her ruling from the throne were her own grandchildren. And that would be Ahaziah's children. And it is in such moments of ambition, fired by fanaticism, such as the Democrats, as we are seeing with the Democratic Party, that sees its opportunity in the massacre of the royal seed, was absolutely determined, and that's exactly what she did, and she carried it out. Because the only people standing between Athaliah and the throne that had just been vacated by her own son, Ahaziah, was her grandchildren who actually deserved the throne. So she murdered her own grandchildren. You think that's horrible? That's exactly what Kamala Harris wants to do with the children of this country that are in the womb. There's life in the womb, and they push for abortion at the very moment, to the very time that they are born. They want them to be exterminated. Athaliah destroyed all of her grandchildren. But there was one. There was one who was spared, and his name was Jehoash. He's the grandson of Jehoram. He's in line for the throne. Athaliah's own grandson, and he escaped because he had an aunt, and her name was Jehosheba. She had married a high priest, and here's another J name, Jehoiada. Jehoiada and Jehosheba, Jehosheba is Athaliah's daughter, hid him away, Jehoash, the boy, the small boy, away, so that Athaliah could not kill him. This is 2 Chronicles 22 and verse 11. So Athaliah cleared the palace of all the royal occupants, proclaimed herself sovereign, and no other woman before or since had sat upon the throne of David, and it is proof of her energy and ability. She reigned for 6 years. She even pulled down portions of the temple or hijacked the vessels of the temple and used them in the temple of Baal. But there was a counter-revolution. It was a peaceable revolution, and it was led by Jehoiada, the high priest. Jehoiada, remember, and his wife Jehosheba had hidden away the young boy, Jehoash, and hidden him away in their apartments near the temple for 7 years. 6 years, actually, he was kept in these small apartments because he was only a year old when Athaliah killed all of his brothers and sisters. He was a young son of Ahaziah. And the details are given in Scripture unusually because it's an interesting story in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. When the time was right, assisted by 5 captains who led the military uprising against the usurper Athaliah, they began her deposition to depose her from the throne. Athaliah was in the royal palace. She was residing one afternoon in the royal palace, and she was aroused to a sense of danger by the acclamation she was hearing greeting the coronation ceremony of young Jehoash, who was now just 7 years old, standing on an elevated platform in the temple court. The palace was hard joined to the temple court. Remember, Solomon had built a causeway, a covered causeway going from the palace to the court. And so she heard all this activity going on. She rushed into the temple courts to see what was occurring. Josephus, an uninspired Jewish commentator of the first century, commenting on the Old Testament, tells us that her guards were prevented from going in with her. Well, be that as it may, as she came in, she saw what was occurring there, and there, standing on the platform, was young Jehoash, 7 years old, Jehoiada the priest behind him, and the book of the law was in the lad's hands. She tore her clothes and she cried treason. She tried to flee, but she was smitten down by avenging guards at the doors of the temple. I'm not suggesting that anyone kill anyone, except, of course, we know that the policies of the Democratic Party is to kill the unborn. And I'm not suggesting that murder is going on anyplace else, but it does show you what actually has been taking place. We have orchestration behind the scene. We have power behind the throne, what we call the deep state. And now we have a power broker or power brokers in the palace itself that are pulling the strings and putting up Kamala Harris, who wants to be the queen. And that's exactly what's taking place in America. Sadly, we have turned the Constitution on its head. We have only one hope in America, and that is to get Donald Trump back into the White House, to turn the Constitution around. But that's not the real ground of our hope. Our ground of our hope is in God, that we as a nation turn to God, repent of our sins, and become godly people and return ourselves back to the Constitution. The first step would be to roll back the Constitution politically, and Donald Trump is able to do that. I want you to notice the statement with which I began regarding our Constitution. The statement was made that we are menaced by collectivist trends and we must seek revival of our strength in the spiritual foundations which are the bedrock of our republic. Democracy, that is, a democratic republic, is the outgrowth of the religious conviction of the sacredness of every human life. That is exactly right. And that is, we have to have religious principle, Christian principle at the very basis of our nation, or we don't deserve to have our nation. And so I pray that Donald Trump will be safe. I pray that we might be able to turn this around, but I pray especially that our nation might turn back to God and not allow the palace coup, led by Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, and all the other George Clooney's of the world, to be successful.